patrons, welcome back to another tutorial, and in this one we're going to be working on the flamingo that we did the sketch outline for. We're going to be adding all of the coloured pencils and rendering it really realistically. And so if you do want to see how I created this sketch outline, then you can see exactly how I did that and follow along with me in a previous tutorial. So as always, the sketch outline and the reference image are attached, and all of the colours that I'm going to be using and the brands and all of the supplies, paper, all of that sort of stuff is also listed in the description as well. So firstly, what we're going to be working on is actually the background. I'm going to get in this nice soft blurry background using the solvent as well to blend and add layers, and then we're going to go and do the flamingo here, this one that's in focus. We have a second flamingo here, but he is more blurred in with the background. So because we're working on the background, we don't want any of the sketch outlines for the background to be too dark. So I'm just taking a piece of tape and I'm going to lighten up this flamingo sketch outline so that I can just about see it. You could also just use an eraser for this, but this technique with the tape means that it lightens it up, but it doesn't completely remove it, and I don't get lots of like little eraser bits, which can be a bit annoying. So I just want to keep erasing it until I can only just about see the lines. I'm not going to get rid of all of the sketch outlines like for this flamingo. Just the area we're working on, but I might lighten up the side of the flamingo because obviously the background will be touching those areas. So like I said, just going to go and do the sides of the flamingo. Just lighten these up a little bit. Okay, I'm going to get a new bit of tape just to really get rid of all of these sketch outlines. Be really careful you're not damaging the paper too much though. Okay, that will do. So let's start to build up some of the layers now. So firstly I'm going to work on this side and come over towards the right hand side later on. The first colour that I want to go in with is the pumpkin orange Prismacolor pencil, and I'm just going to very lightly shade that up here. You don't need to apply a lot of pressure because we're going to be using solvent. I'm going in oval shapes very lightly. All the way up to the flamingo's neck. And so we will be adding other colours to this, but this will make a nice base colour. So there is this white area here, so I'm just looking round about where that is. Just want to preserve that. so that we don't get that too dark. And then just carry on layering the colours. Look for all of the subtle changes in the background. You don't need lots of detail, but it is important to look for the subtle changes in the shapes. Just keep layering. So now I'm going to add a little bit of pink Prismacolor again to this area, because you can see as it's white here, it does slightly tinge to pink at the ends. So I'm just going to overlap some of that pink. Also add some of that over the orange. Again, still not pressing hard on the pencils. And I'm also going to add some of the pink to this area here. I'm now going to go in with the terracotta, another Prismacolor, just for these darker, more shadowed areas. The colours do appear a lot more vibrant once you go and blend them with solvents, so don't worry too much about that at the moment. They will look nice and vibrant and more rich and dark when we go and add the solvent in. Also going to add a little bit of the Caran d'Ache Burnt Sienna. Once again, very lightly. Just shade this on. And I'm also going to layer some of the Scarlet Lake. Give it a bit more vibrancy. Remember, your colours don't have to be perfect and exactly like the reference image. Mainly just look at where the shadows are and the highlights. I'm going to layer some of the white down on this area. And a bit more of the pink. You always want to make sure that on every area there is still some coloured pencil to help blend it out. Also adding a bit of white up there, as well as the pink and as well as the clay rose over here, because it is a bit more dulled down a bit more dull. And same with the edges of this highlight. Okay, so let's move on to this area up here. I'm firstly going to layer some of the clay rose down, looking at the shapes of these blurred objects. Because it's more dull, I'm going to add a layer of the clay rose to start off with. And a bit of the pumpkin orange on the side here where it's a bit more warm toned. A bit of the burnt sienna 50%, the Caran d'Ache pencil. Up here where it's a bit more shadowed. And layer some of the pink on this side. I'm going to add some of the Luminance Burnt Ochre. And also the Luminance Sepia for this darker shadow. Okay. So now we've got quite a big highlighted area here, just in line with the end and start of the beak. So let's section that off and add a bit of the pink very lightly over this area. Again, we're not trying to add too much detail and harsh edges, so overlap the colours onto the areas next to it. Adding more layers for the more shadowed areas. And now I'm going to go in with the clay rose for more of the shadowed areas, more of the dulled down areas. I'm going to layer some of the white over this area as well to give more pigment, so that when we blend it with the solvent, there's more pigment down to blend and mix together and dissolve. I'm going to add a little bit of the peach to some areas that are a bit more orange tinge to them, like in the middle bit here. And now this area next to it is very orange, very vibrant, so I'm going to go in with the pumpkin orange, start to layer some of that down. Goes all the way down the beak. And shade it all on this side. It's pretty much this area apart from this sort of corner bit. Remember to keep a very light hand during all of this. If you damage the tooth of the paper, it'll be hard to get additional layers on top. So our main aim is always to preserve the paper, not to damage it. I'm just going to add the orange tone over here, it carries on. So I'm looking for all of these slightly orangey areas. I'm not going to be working on the flamingo yet. Okay, so back to this area, I'm going to overlap some pink in this corner. And also some clay rose. I'm also going to overlap some of the Scarlet Lake to give this more of a red tinge. I'm going to go in with the burnt ochre. And also a bit of the sunburst yellow to give it a bit more vibrancy to it. Up here. I'm also going to add a little bit of the Faber-Castell orange glaze. Shade some of the red again, the Scarlet Lake. And also a little bit of the burnt sienna Caran d'Ache pencil, but you don't have to use these exact pencils, you can use whatever you have. It's just like this reddy brown colour. Back in with the burnt ochre luminance. I'm going to add some white to this highlight. Again, remember, because it needs to have some pigment down in order to blend these areas out. I'm going to add some of the peach going into the highlight as well. Down here it becomes more green, more brown. So I'm first going to put in a layer of sepia. Actually no, this is the 70% French grey, not the sepia. Just layer that down very lightly and in between here. Now I'm going to add in some of the marine green Prismacolor pencil. And some of the sepia as well in a second. So now some of the sepia. I'm going to add some of the Cerulean Brown Caran d'Ache pencil to the shadowed areas, give it more of a dark red tinge to it. Also add some of that over here as well. Add some of the terracotta. And also some of the burnt sienna 50% to merge in with this area a bit more. Okay, so this area here is mainly white, so I'm going to start by overlapping quite a lot of white in this area. Even though you can't see it, it will be there, so just be very light-handed still. Don't try and burnish it in. So I'm just adding this to all of the white areas. I'm going to use my eraser to really get rid of the edges on the flamingo. Don't want them to show through in these light areas. I'm going to add the black for the beak. The first layer when we blend it out might look harsh, but we're going to be building up multiple layers on the background. I'm going in with the mulberry, this more purple tinge. I'm going to try and avoid too much detail, so really overlap colours. Just want to give the impression that this is another flamingo. Overlap some more black. Roughly blocking where the eye would be. I'm going to add some of the pink, getting the shadows on these lighter areas. Add some of the pumpkin orange. Just going to sharpen this pencil. Just adding more of this orange to the neck of the flamingo. Also going to add some of the terracotta for more of these shadowed areas. Still being very light. Going to overlap some of the sky blue light. And then also some of the French grey, 70%. Keeping it all very blurred, very soft. I'm going to add some of the peach just here, just above the beak, the black part of the beak. Add more pink for this highlighted area. Going to add some of the clay rose over the top of the head as well. Overlapping some peach into the highlight, and I'm also going to add a little bit of the mulberry as well on the edge of the beak, but I'm also overlapping it onto the black of the beak to try and keep everything a bit more on the soft side. Add in some of the clay rose. Going to add a little bit more of the pumpkin orange. Just going to build up more and more layers on the flamingo. Going to add some of the scarlet red on top of the flamingo. I'm going to overlap some of the peach over this entire area. Again, we want to make sure there's enough pigment down. I'm going to add a little bit of the burnt sienna 50% to these shadowed areas. I'm going to add some of our Cerulean brown. Overlapping some of the colour onto the beak to give it that blurred effect. I'm going to layer some of the clay rose. And a little bit of the sky blue light. I'm also going to add the burnt sienna. I'm adding the really dark shadows on the neck now. the yellow ochre bit on the eye. Add more black to the beak. And a bit to the surrounding areas. Overlap more of that mulberry. Burnt ochre. It really is just about overlapping lots and lots of colours for the blurred background without having too much detail. More of the Scarlet Lake. Like here you can see and you can tell that this is a flamingo. You can't see lots and lots of detail, and when you blend it out you'll be able to see even less detail. Keep sharpening your pencils. Makes it easier for them to go down, and they go down a lot smoother. Going to add a little bit of the sunburst yellow. Adding some more of the Scarlet Lake on this side. I'm going to layer some more of the white on this area. I'm going to add a bit of the pomegranate. This gives more of a pink tinge to certain areas, pinky purple. So at the moment I'm just, looking around the reference image, looking at my drawing and seeing if there's anything that I notice that I need to adjust. Like I just noticed that that part of the beak needs to be darker, it's too light. And so I just keep looking around, like I feel like this needs a bit more shadow, so I'm going in with the black raspberry. Same up here. I just want to make sure the contrast is nice. I feel like this area is too light, so I'm going to go in with the 70% French grey and layer some more of that over the top. It's just about going back and forth and looking, tweaking and then looking again. And some more of the Scarlet Lake. And some of the burnt ochre. Going to add a little bit of the sepia where the eye is, to the shadows above the eye. Add a tiny bit of Copenhagen blue. Add in a bit more peach. Now I'm going to go in with my burnt sienna and really start to get in some of those shadows before we blend it out. And to do this, you don't need to apply any more pressure, it's just about layering and layering the colours. Add a bit more of the orange glaze to give it more saturation. Add a bit more white. Add some pigment, enough pigment everywhere. Okay, so let's go in now and blend it. I'm going to be using the Zest It pencil blend, and I'm also going to be using this Sable Filbert brush. Bit of a long paintbrush. And so I'm going to start first over on this area. Because this is our first layer, we can get away with using a bit more of the solvent on the brush. Just get rid of all the excess. Just blends and dissolves these colours together. Really take your time with this. The more layers you do, the smoother it's gonna get. You can see just how vibrant it really makes it all. There we go, blended out that side. See, because this is watercolour paper, it absorbs the solvent a lot quicker. So you need a bit more of it to blend. I don't mind that. So I'm first going up and down, and then I just blend it in the opposite direction just to smooth it out a bit once it's had time to like sink in a bit more. So up and down and then to the side. Gonna blend out the beak. Careful not to smudge it too much into all of the neighbouring areas, otherwise they'll look too dark and dull. So now that it's all blended, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for it, because it's the first layer, it'll take the longest to dry. So I'm just going to wait for all of this to dry before we go in and add a second layer on top. Just make sure everything's blended. Probably give it about 15 minutes just to make sure it's fully dry. Now that I've given it enough time to dry, I'm working on building up a second layer, and I'm first going in with the burnt ochre Caran d'Ache pencil, and just like before, I'm still not applying hardly any pressure, just enough to get it onto the paper, but it should glide on fairly easily. Going to add a bit of the burnt sienna for these darker areas. Remember, each layer we do is going to get smoother and smoother. Add some of the clay rose. I'm pretty much just adding the colours that were there before, but just adding more of it. Adding the burnt sienna 50% now. And also some of the pink. It's going to give it more of a vibrant look with these second layers. Also going to add some peach. And some of the burnt ochre. Burnt sienna. And again, I'm going to layer in some of the clay rose. And the peach. Also add in some of the pumpkin orange. A bit of pink for vibrancy. Just layer in the pumpkin orange over this area. That was the main colour we used for this area. Now that we already have the base down, it becomes quicker to just go and glaze all of these other colours over the top and build up more and more layers. Going in with the pink. magenta. Like I said, just adding more and more of the same colours. I want it to be nice and vibrant. Add some more of the black. You can just see how easily it goes on. Effortlessly. Add in the scarlet red. I'm going to add some of the Tuscan red. Also add in some white to these highlighted areas. Actually add in some of the white over most of the areas. Because this is a really creamy pencil, it will just help it become really blurred and nice. So I'm just overlapping lots of it. Once we get it nice and smooth, we can then go in and we can actually go and darken areas up as we need to. So this technique works really well with the white pencil, I find. I'm just going to mix in a few other colours as well as the white, like the red. Keep everything quite loose. And some of the blue in. Some of our green. And the French grey 70%. Adding the indigo blue over the beak. Adding some of the peach. And so now I'm going to go back in with the brush, less solvent on it this time, because we want to start to buff and smooth everything out. I'm just going to have a touch of it on the brush. Just buffing it out with circular motions. Buffing out the dark areas first, so that we don't darken up the lighter areas too much. And because it's all creamy and waxy, they're nice and soft and they're easy to blend. Blend out the highlighted area. So the main aim of this layer is not to have the colours correct, but to have it nice and smooth. That's what the purpose of this layer is. That's what the purpose of adding the white pencil was. So I'm being very careful when I blend it out this time. I'm using the minimal amount of solvent on the brush that I possibly can, because if I was to use more then it wouldn't look nice and smooth. I wouldn't be able to blend the colours like this. I'm hardly dipping the brush back in the solvent. Really just working the colour pencil to get that nice smooth look. I'm blending out the black on the beak now, the black and the blue. Keep wiping off and cleaning the brush if you need to as well. Okay. So now that everything's blended, I'm going to go and start to work on this side again. I'm just going to work on building up any shadows and any highlights to get the nice contrast that we need. So I'm first going to go in with the white pencil throughout and just really get in these lighter areas. Any areas that need to go lighter, I'm just adding a bit of the white. And I'm also going to go in and build up the shadows, firstly using the terracotta. And some of the Cerulean brown. Really do want to have a nice contrast, so I'm going to add some of the sepia for these shadows. Adding the burnt ochre, the Caran d'Ache luminance. And also adding the burnt sienna. I'm also going to add some of the scarlet red. Add the black to the beak. And our mulberry. Adding some of the scarlet red on the head of the flamingo. Still layering the scarlet red. Adding the burnt sienna. Going back with the burnt ochre. And some of the sunburst yellow. And adding some of the orange glaze. And now the pumpkin orange. I'm also adding the black raspberry. And then the sky blue light. Also the 70% French grey again. Add in the white. Add in some more of the cerulean brown for the shadowed areas over here. Still focusing on the contrast. Add in a bit of the pomegranate. I'm going to go in with the sepia as well. Build up some of the darkest shadows. So once I'm going in with a very light hand and just blending all of this out in the same way that I did before. Focusing on the shadowed areas first this time, because I want to keep the highlights nice and bright. So just smoothing out all of these shadowed areas. You can use your fingers a bit to blend out as well. Helps to give it a smooth look. Just cleaning off the brush. And I'm going to add and blend out the highlights now. Blending it out with a clean finger. Just going to go in with a finger and just blend over everything. Any areas that look like they need to be softened out a bit. I want to create a nice streaked effect, so I'm just using tissue to blend it down a bit, just to create this sort of streaking. Whilst the solvent's still sort of wet. Really helps to soften everything out. Now it gives it that natural blurry look that we're going for. I just want to sharpen my white pencil and use that to get in some of these bright highlights though, before I move on. Just shade in some highlight. I really want it to have a nice contrast, as I keep saying. So I'm shading in some white. And on the head. You can apply a bit more pressure because we don't need to apply lots and lots of layers anymore. Just adding a highlight on the eye and going over it with the yellow ochre. So now I'm going to use a clean bit of tissue just to smudge that out, soften it all. Keep switching to a new bit of tissue. I'm just going to saturate some of these areas with some more red. Adding in some of the mulberry as well. Some more of the black on the beak. Going to add some pink as well. Once again, just use some of the tissue just to blend this out. Because we're still doing this while the solvent's not fully dry, so it means we can easily blend. Just avoid going over the highlighted areas. Add in some little pops of green and some of the sepia. Going in with the white. Again, clean bit of tissue, blend downwards. We're going to actually be working on the main flamingo now, and I'm going in first with the black coloured pencil, the Caran d'Ache pencil, and I'm just starting by filling in the pupil. I'm going to be working on the eye to start off with. So now I'm going over to the sepia. I'm getting in these shadowed areas. Because this flamingo is in focus, we're going to be looking at all of the details and getting all of them in. I'm going to go add some of the yellow ochre to the iris part. I'm going in with the French grey 70%. I'm going to add some more of the burnt sienna. Well, actually it's the first time I've used this. Also adding in some of the clay rose for the shadows. I'm going to add some more of the yellow ochre. Add a little bit of the marine green. It's a bit of a green tinge. And I'm also going to go in with the black now and work on getting in all of the blackest areas. So the nostril here. So just look for the darkest parts of the flamingo. It's mainly going to be on the beak, and just layer in some of the black. I always find it's easier if we've got the darkest values in to judge all of the other values. Remember, we want some harsh edges because this flamingo is in focus. We don't need lots of pressure. Okay, now I'm going in with the indigo blue. Some blue above the nostril. I'm going to use the clay rose now to get in some of these little folds and all these different parts of the beak. Adding it all around the nostril. I'm gonna actually erase some of this. And the sky blue light. Going in with the pumpkin orange as well. I'm very much using the same sort of colours that I did with the background. Adding the brown sienna. And some of the pink as well. And the pomegranate. And also a bit of the scarlet red. Add in a bit of the blue. So now I want to add a layer of red around the eyes. Erase the sketch outline a bit so we can't see that graphite. And now I'm going to shade a base layer of the scarlet red all on the neck of the flamingo. Very light layer. I'm just building up more where the shadowed areas are, or where it's more red, more saturated. Some red around the nostrils as well. Add in some of the French grey 70%. Now I want to add some of the pumpkin orange as another base layer. Over the whole area. So now I want to go in with the burnt sienna and get in these shadows. So firstly, I'm looking at the shape of the shadow on the neck. So I'm looking at the shadows around the eye, the direction the feathers are going in. You don't need to press hard, just build up the layers. Now I'm going to add some sepia, darken it up even further. It's quite dark, but it's not quite black. Just going to add some of the French grey 70%. Just defining the outer edge of the flamingo a bit. I'm going to add some of the orange glaze over the flamingo, and I want to start building up some more of the red tones, so I'm going to go in with the Cerulean brown, which is more reddy. As you can see, at the moment I'm not worrying about getting in the fur direction, the feather direction, sorry. I'm going to go in with the sepia as well. A bit of the marine green underneath, and the yellow ochre, a bit of the black raspberry, some of the sky blue light as well. Also adding some of the clay rose. I do like to jump around quite a bit as I work. Add some of the indigo blue. Add some more of the sepia. Let's really get in these shadows. going in and adding some of the pumpkin orange. Some of the terracotta. And some of the pomegranate. So now I'm going in and I'm blending the first layer on the flamingo. As this is the first layer on this area, we can use a bit more of the solvent. I do love using solvent. I really think it makes it look like a painting rather than a drawing. Being very careful when I blend this area. Being careful not to smudge into the background. I'm blending all of the black areas in one go. I'm not smudging into other areas. Don't want to get the drawing dirty. I want to keep it nice and crisp. Blending out the blue now. So even though I'm using the Zest It pencil blend, you can use paint thinner, Gamsol, lots of different types of solvent that you can use. You don't just have to use this, because I know it can be difficult to get in some countries, expensive to ship. Okay. Okay, so now I'm just gonna wait for this to dry. Again, give it about 15 minutes like we did with the first layer of the background. And then we'll add all of the little details. Now that I've let it dry for a while, I'm going to go in and work on the details. I'm first going in with the white pencil. And I'm going to use that just to add some of the highlights. There's a main highlight inside the eye and just this lighting on top of like the eyelid area. Add in the little details. Going to start to add the little feathers. Quite a bright highlight up here, so I'm pressing quite hard on the white pencil to really get it to show up. I want to have a nice contrast. All the way down. Not just doing it as a line though, I'm looking at it as like highlighted feathers. A lot of highlight on the beak. on the outer edge. Really want to get a nice clean edge, so I'm applying a lot of pressure. And around the flamingo as well, on the background at the bottom. Really looking at the direction of these feathers. They're quite short around this area. Just getting in all of the highlights for the moment, not the shadows. So I'm just adding all of the texture, but we can go over this and tone it down later on by glazing the colours over it. Otherwise it's going to look too washed out. So now I'm going to go in with the burnt sienna. Start to make little feather marks as well. Get the texture in. Just shading all of the shadow in. Because this whole area is quite a lot darker, I'm just going to go and shade this whole section in. Same thing here. Going to go in with the sepia as well for some of these darker shadows down here. Shade in some of this darker shadow. I'm also going to glaze over some of the burnt ochre. Add in some of the orange glaze over the top as well. Give it more vibrance. Going to add some of the terracotta down here. Adding some of the black raspberry. Just shade in the shadow for this whole area. Add in the sepia. Add in the pumpkin orange. Add some of the orange glaze. Okay, you can slightly blend over it with any excess solvent. Just slightly blend it all. Okay, so now I'm going in again. I'm going to go in with a bit of pink and just use this to add some lighter texture. the white pencil. Shading on some highlight on this side. Adding the burnt sienna now. Adding a bit of the red. So I'm just looking at the contrast around the flamingo. but this area needs to be really, really white. Glaze some of the orange over the top. So I'm adding the contrast on the background as well. Going over it with some red. Adding some pumpkin orange. In the white now. Going to add some of the French grey 70%. Start to add lots of detail. add some of the burnt ochre. Add in some of the orange glaze over the top. And some of the Perylene brown. I'm going to press a bit harder with the orange glaze to get some details. Add in some of the burnt sienna. I'm going to use the clay rose on the beak. Just adding some pink to the background. Gonna add some of the red. Just saturate this flamingo a bit. blend in some of the sunburst yellow. I'm going to sharpen the red pencil. Just glaze it over the background. Now I'm adding the mulberry. Add the pumpkin orange. And also a bit of the orange glaze. Make it more vibrant. Okay, so now I want to go in again with the white some more. Just making some final adjustments. I'm going to add a little bit of the green. Add a little bit of black as well. Just going to add some more of the dark indigo blue. The last thing that I want to do is add some of the really bright highlights, and to do that I'm using some white gouache, but you can use, which is archival for coloured pencils, you can use the titanium white touch-up titanium white powder and touch-up texture and mix them together and they make like a paint, and that's archival. Gouache isn't really archival with coloured pencils, but I'm not planning on selling this or doing anything like that with this piece. It's just for the purpose of this tutorial. So I'm just going to use a little bit of gouache because that's what I had to hand. But you'd apply it in the same way as you'd apply the brush and pencil products. Just using a brush. Just get a really nice crisp edge. Just adding a few lighter bits of feathers. Little details, subtle highlights. Anyway guys, that is it for this tutorial. I really hope you enjoyed it and enjoyed learning how to do a blurry background and this more detailed flamingo. But that is it for this one, and I'll see you guys in another tutorial. Bye everybody.